Now, I'd say I disliked this episode more than I disliked Season 1, Episode 1, so that's not a great sign, but overall, I feel like maybe there's a chance for this show still.
A little while later,
Episode 2 is out, and it's abysmal ass.
There's no A-plot. We were complaining there's no B-plot in the first episode. There's no A-plot. What's the A-plot?
No plot.
This episode completely ruined a whole bunch more stuff about Harcourt, who is somewhat interesting in Season 1, and is just like, whatever in Season 2.
Like, the side plot, it's nothing actually happening. It's just, like, two people having a conversation with dumb jokes, and then nothing happens.
This is the worst dialogue ever.
And then it was outdone by every single scene that they kept cutting back to with a flurry in economies.
Yeah.
What is this writing? How is this so bad?
Bro, you gotta stop taking it seriously. It's a comic book show.
Bird blindness? What are we doing? And then that has an effect.
It has an effect on the plot.
When we go, it's goofy.
Bro, I just watched.
Well, here we are, 8 weeks later, at the finale of Peacemaker Season 2. And oh boy, do I feel bad for that sweet summer child who somehow thought they were going to manage to turn this show around. Now, don't worry, I'm going to get fully into the reason I dislike Season 2 of Peacemaker. Before I do want to point out that I like a lot of James Gunn's work. I like Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1 and 2. I quite enjoy Volume 3. I think The Suicide Squad is very good. Heck, I really liked Peacemaker Season 1. That being said, all of that aside, this is my opinion on the show, obviously. I definitely do see a way that someone could enjoy this show, but it was pretty clear to me early on in watching this show that any value a fan or anybody really would find in enjoying this show wouldn't come from the writing, the story, or the characters. It would boil down to whether or not you find the humor in this show funny. If you watch episode 1 and you barely laugh, you are not going to like this show whatsoever. If you watch episode 1 and have a great time, buckle up. You're in for a treat. This show is going to be perfect for you. Before I even begin to explain the flaws or problems with the show, I'm going to go ahead and right now take away the main defenses you're going to see defending this show. Heck, if you scroll down to the comments, and there are comments, those might be there already. I'm sure that there are James Gunn bros out there who saw the thumbnail and got extremely pissed and went right down to the comments to leave a super angry statement calling me an idiot or saying I'm media illiterate or that I didn't understand the show or whatever. To which I will say the main defenses you will see against my criticisms of the writing of this plot, the script, the characters, is that you shouldn't take it so seriously, or it's not that deep, or it's supposed to be goofy, or it's supposed to be stupid. To which I will say I am going to seriously analyze it. I am going to look deeply at it. The defense that something is supposed to be stupid is a terrible defense for why a story sucks. Yes, shows can be humorous and funny. They should still have a basic story, especially when they are extremely important to the future of the universe it's setting up. But hey, don't take my word for that being the case, because the creator of this show has said that himself.
Superman leads into this show, and then we have the setting up of all of the rest of the DCU in this season of Peacemaker. It's incredibly important.
Now, recently when I've done reviews for shows or movies, I try to give a basic outline of the plot or a basic overview of the story in order to familiarize the audience with what I'm talking about before I really tear into the meat of the problems I have with the shows. I'm not going to do that with this one because the story and the plot is all over the place, as you'll see with my review, that if I tried to explain it to somebody, you would think I was either joking, making stuff up, or completely schizophrenic. The primary issue Season 2 of Peacemaker has is that it doesn't follow any traditional storytelling methods that you would see in any form of TV or movie for that matter. The way you tell a story across a TV show traditionally is that you set up a quote-unquote A-plot in the first episode of a show. That A-plot is going to be across the entire season and is going to be the main driving factor behind what is happening in the story. For example, in Season 1 of Peacemaker, Episode 1 establishes that Peacemaker is needed to help the crew that eventually becomes the 11th Street Kids. They're the Black Ops spinoff of Argus. He is there to help them stop Project Butterfly. That's established in Episode 1. Throughout the rest of Season 1, each episode brings us one step closer to the ultimate goal of Peacemaker shutting down Project Butterfly, ultimately culminating in the finale of Peacemaker stopping Project Butterfly. There, you have a fully coherent story across one season of television that's established in the first episode. On top of an A-plot being set up,
you want to set up a B plot in each different episode. That B plot is going to be the driving factor just behind that episode itself. That way, the viewer watches the episode and feels like time wasn't wasted and something was accomplished in the show. And oftentimes, it's in fact recommended that that B plot also in some way pushes the A plot further along its story. Again, looking at Peacemaker Season 1, Episode 5 establishes the B plot that the crew is going to the food distribution hub of the butterflies. That's the B plot of the episode. They go there to scout it out, where they then discover it's crawling with the alien butterflies. By the end of the episode, the B plot of taking down the food distribution hub is completely solved, and the A plot of stopping Project Butterfly itself is one step closer to being completed. Episode 1 of Season 2 somewhat establishes an A plot, and there are sort of elements set up that kind of run throughout the whole series. The main one being that something happened on a boat between Harcourt and Peacemaker. Now, when you're watching episode 1, that doesn't actually feel like any plot set up for the most part. Any true thing that feels kind of like an A plot is obviously the ending where Peacemaker kills his doppelganger inside the quantum unfolding chamber. But notably, in this episode, there is no B plot. There is nothing driving the characters forward every time. You get stuck instead with this and then concept. This is something that Trey Parker and Matt Stone, the brilliant minds behind South Park, have talked about in the past, where your story is doomed if you look at your outline and your script and then fits between it, because it means nothing is driving the plot further along.
We can take these beats, which are basically the beats of your outline, and if the words "and then" belong between those beats, what should happen between every beat that you've written down is either the word "therefore" or "but." And that's why you get a show that feels like, okay, this to that, to this to that, but this, here's the complication to that.
Just like, this happened and then this happened and this happened. That's not a movie, you know, that's not a story. Like Trey said, it's those two, but, because, therefore, that gives you the causation between each beat, and that makes that's a story.
Then that A plot that was seemingly set up in episode 1 is completely ignored in episode 2, and it doesn't play an effect on the plot at all in that one. Nothing that happens in episode 2 until the very end actually pushes Peacemaker to deal with the problems of having killed his doppelganger from another universe. Meaning, realistically, you can skip episode 2 as a whole. You just need to watch those 2 important minutes, which is a notable trend that runs throughout this entire season of TV. Ultimately, though, however, none of that even matters, because the finale has nothing to do with anything really even remotely set up in episode 1 in at least half of the episodes. The finale has nothing to do with the consequences of the alternate universe or the doppelganger to an extent. The only thing it involves is the quantum unfolding chamber itself. All of the things with the doppelganger or the alternate universe are sort of addressed in episode 7, but not even fully concluded. It's kind of just left where it's at. So now, the big finale of this show is dealing with elements that was kind of, sort of, somewhat set up in episodes midway through the series, meaning that there's so much in the show that is irrelevant to the ultimate conclusion it leads us to. The finale deals with Argus trying to use the quantum unfolding chamber to find some kind of habitable planet, which is later, of course, revealed to be a metahuman prison, which ultimately doesn't really make sense in line with characters either, but we'll get to that later, don't worry. But the point I'm making with that is that the show as a whole is doomed to fail, or doomed to feel like a waste of time, when everything's set up in episode 1, and even stuff set up in episode 2 has no effect on the finale of the show. The effects that are the finale of the show are set up very briefly, with a lot of intuition involved in trying to figure out that that's what that's setting up. When I watched episode 7, I felt like the series was done, and I was so confused at where the finale was even supposed to lead, because all of the setup in the earlier season was essentially set up for episode 7, and none of that is addressed in episode 8. It's almost as if it's part of another show entirely. The show is doomed to fail when it can't follow the basic day one principle that a TV show needs to have of a coherent story running across the whole season, something the exact same creative team managed to do just a couple of years ago with Peacemaker Season 1. And it's not like that's something that just applies to drama shows or action shows or sci-fi shows. No, it applies to shows across the board, including comedies. Look at South Park or Tires, shows that have objectively ridiculous stories, but they're riddled with comedy bits that actually push the plot forward. And there's a plot that runs across the whole season, an overarching problem that is being solved. Each episode's minor plot pushes the characters one step closer to solving the season-long plot. All right, that out of the way, let's talk about the characters. Peacemaker Season 1 is by no means a writing masterclass, but I ultimately ended up enjoying it, oftentimes because of the characters. The development and growth and the interactions between them is what made me enjoy the show quite a bit. In fact, a lot of times, I can often overlook mistakes in storytelling or ridiculous concepts if the characters are compelling in and of themselves. Peacemaker Season 1 managed to do this with the growth and the development of the 11th Street Kids. Now, pretty much every character is fully regressed, altered, or destroyed in Peacemaker Season 2. Starting with Peacemaker himself, who in Season 1 had some of the strongest character growth throughout the whole show. His character growth is entirely driven by the fact that he made the decision to kill Rick Flag Jr. in the Suicide Squad. Peacemaker has to grapple with the fact that he thinks Rick Flag was a patriotic soldier doing what he thought was right, and Peacemaker ultimately decided to kill him anyway. This is something that haunts him, as we see in Season 1 with all the flashbacks to Rick Flag's death. Rick Flag's final words saying,
"Peacemaker. What a joke."
Is something that drives Chris's story forward throughout the whole series. He sees himself in Rick Flag. He is a patriotic soldier who's doing what he thinks is right and ultimately realizes he was on the wrong side. And in fact, sometimes people don't have the best intentions in heart when they're sending him to save American lives. This event led Chris to question his whole life and ultimately decide to try and do better by it. And this ultimately builds up to Chris having to make the extreme decision to give up on his desperation for his father's love and ultimately decide to kill him towards the end of Season 1. Finally accepting that his dad is an evil man, and also accepting that the 11th Street Kids, his friends, are his true family. Ultimately, Peacemaker comes to the decision that he doesn't need the approval of other superheroes or the government to tell him what he's doing is right, and that he is able to determine right and wrong and what's the difference between those. He becomes comfortable in his own way, no longer insecure about how he goes about saving lives. That is shown in the finale, where he shuts down Project Butterfly and walks away a hero, deciding he doesn't need the Justice League to help stop Project Butterfly. Then, all of a sudden, in Season 2, Peacemaker is broken back down. He's extremely insecure and decides he wants to join the Justice Gang. Obviously, in this universe, it was the Justice Gang who he told to go shove it at the end of Season 1. It wasn't the Justice League. Now, he's super insecure about his decision. He thinks he looks weird. He takes everything they say to heart when that was never an issue or something he even considered in the Suicide Squad or Season 1 of Peacemaker. He didn't care people's opinion of him, but now he's been regressed to not only care of people's opinion about him, but be desperate for their admiration and wanting to join the Justice Gang, needing to be a part of their group. Then, of course, he's completely blindsided by the reveal of the Nazi world, where there's a swastika on the American flag. He didn't see the Hitler mural on the wall, all because he was blinded by his desperation for family. Whereas his dad's evilness, his racism, his Nazism, whatever you want to call it, in Season 1 is ultimately what drove him to reject his father and realize that he doesn't need to be loved and admired by his father. You could say maybe he didn't see it because it was his brother, but I think the same would apply if the character actually grew as he was showed. He also goes on to completely ignore his friends and shut them out, which was showed that he needed them and he cared about them through Season 1 and also part of Season 2. It doesn't make sense that one bad night with Harcourt is all it takes for him to want to go to another universe. All these things are what show that his character has completely regressed. Harcourt is basically no different. In Season 1, she starts at this point of thinking Chris is a loser and a bad person, until she grows to actually see the person on the inside and learn to appreciate who he is, as well as Chris developing in and of himself, and she's able to accept that she likes Peacemaker and cares for him. Obviously, one of the final shots in Season 1 is her holding Peacemaker's hands, finally accepting who he is and that she has feelings towards him. She also learns to embrace herself and accept her friends for who they are, whereas now in Season 2, she thinks Chris is a loser and she thinks he's a failure, and she's insecure about herself now, and she's closed off to all her friends, refusing to open up to them. Economos also somewhat regresses. In Season 1, he has to grow out of his comfort zone of always being in the van or being the guy not involved in the action. He doesn't want to risk his neck at the start, and then through the development of the show, he grows a spine. He's willing to come out and obviously go on the ultimate mission to try to plant the bomb on Project Butterfly. He fails, but he was willing to still make the decision by the end of Season 1. In Season 2, he's back to being a spineless coward. He refuses to get involved in action scenes, always trying to flee and leave his friends behind, which he never would have done by the end of season 1. Also, there's moments where he is willing to sell his friends out so that he doesn't get fired, whereas we are first introduced to Economos by him defying Waller's orders in the Suicide Squad that 100% in his mind would lead him to assume he's going to get fired. Adebayo and Vigilante are essentially completely ignored in season 2. Their characters aren't touched at all. They don't really regress necessarily. In some ways they do, but ultimately they don't have any change at all. They don't have growth or regression. They stay static and are essentially there normally as joke machines. They're there to provide a humor bit from time to time, whereas they both had real stories in season 1. The only time you even remotely get close to Vigilante's character being shown at all, in fact, is during the scene where it's revealed in his basement. He has tons of drugs and cash that he stole from drug dealers, but he refused to turn them into the police. That shows his corrupt moral judgment, as we already knew from season 1. But other than this, there's pretty much no character for Vigilante. He is there as a joke machine. He only tells jokes in this season. And like I said, Adebayo has no real character in this season at all, whereas she was paramount in Peacemaker's growth and development in season 1. Now, the characters regressing or whatever wouldn't necessarily be an issue, because sometimes people fall back to their bad habits, but the problem is they then go through the exact same development that they did in season 1, meaning that by the end of season 2, we are right back at the same starting point that we should have been at for season 2. Each character who regressed in this season started at the same starting point they started at in season 1. The finale shows them walking out of their new agency, all buddy-buddy friends, whereas that's realistically what it feels like they would have been at the end of season 1. Their character arcs are just repeated. Harcourt and Peacemaker grow to learn to accept each other. Peacemaker learns the Nazi world is a bad place because he needs to ignore his desire to be loved for family, whatever. They go through the exact same character arcs, meaning that there's no new writing. It's just rehashed character growth from old seasons. Okay, characters out of the way. Now it's time to finally get into the true abysmal writing of this show. Now again, I could sit here and break down every stupid plot point and contrivance and inconsistent plot and story, but I would be here for literal hours. Instead, I'm going to talk about a lot of things broadly and then go very in-depth on a couple of points to just show you the contrivance and stupidity in this show. Now, in general, the pacing of this show is awful. There are moments where plot is happening and then the scene cuts away to a pointless scene that's 5 minutes long where a character makes a joke. Usually this is done with Vigilante talking about animal facts of some way, or it's a stupid conversation like the bird blindness conversation. None of the humor points actually push the plot forward at all, and instead they're just attempts at humor constantly. The only one of these dumb humor scenes that actually has an effect on the plot is that stupid bird blindness conversation, where the character Flurry says he has bird blindness, which is such a stupid concept to have, and ultimately somehow it affects the plot because they go to hunt Eagly down, but he thinks it's a duck because he has bird blindness and he can't see it apart. So, in order to combat the Eagle, Argus, which is supposed to be a competent government organization in charge with watching metahumans and capturing metahumans and all that. Remember, in Superman, they were the organization in charge of keeping Superman held captive. Hire a Master Eagle Hunter. Master Eagle Hunter hits his head on a rock where he has amnesia of some kind, and then he goes off into the woods, strips down to a loincloth, and does a blood ritual in order to figure out where Eagly is. Then, after his blood ritual, he is an astral projection of him flies around the forest trying to find Eagly. Do you see why I said if I broke down the story and plot, you would think I was insane or schizophrenic? Speaking of Argus, let's talk about them. Again, the government agency in charge with detaining Superman. They are incompetent idiots. Like I said, there's a scene where highly trained agents go to get Eagly out of Peacemaker's house, and they get their asses kicked by an eagle, of all things. They constantly have stupid, pointless conversations. It doesn't seem like there's a competent one in the bunch. I mean, just the scene where they go to arrest Peacemaker at his house, they don't do the very basic concept of setting a perimeter around the building so that the fugitive can't escape out the back door, which, sure enough, Peacemaker escapes out the back door because there's no perimeter. All right, I've put it off long enough. Let's talk about the alternate universe. So, the ultimate subversive, crazy twist is that this universe that Peacemaker has called the best universe ever and keeps going back to is actually an alternate universe where the Nazis won World War II. Now, as a viewer, there's no real way to actually pick up that this happened. They don't show you any imagery, they don't give you any plot reason to actually think that this happened, unless you have been paying attention to modern Hollywood and notice that there is a distinct lack of diversity in the extras in the background, which I noticed, and I know a lot of people out there did notice, even though, I wouldn't fault you for not noticing this, because there are areas, especially in the state of Washington, where this is supposed to take place, that have a 99% white population. So, whereas you're supposed to be, I guess, some gotcha'd into a being racist moment if you didn't catch this, it's kind of just something that's able to happen in the world ever. Now, in Hollywood, it doesn't happen because of whatever reasons, and whether you think those are right, whatever, who cares? The point is that this is supposed to be a big twist because you didn't notice. And then it's ultimately revealed by Peacemaker unfolding an American flag, and there's a swastika on it. And then the second after it's revealed, now it's glaringly obvious, and it's over-the-top ridiculous. Harcourt goes, "There's a Hitler mural on the wall, you didn't notice that?" And it's just like, yeah, you can't have a gotcha subversive twist when you don't have any of this already set up subtly in the background, and now you're going out of your way to make it ridiculous and over the top. And now now Adebayo's being chased down the streets by the racists and the fascists. It's like, it gets ridiculous and over the top once it's ultimately revealed to the viewer that this is Nazi world. Which, do I even need to explain why this is stupid? I mean, the fact that this is the first flag we've even seen is ridiculous. You know, the NA in Nazi stands for nationalist, meaning everyone who is a true Nazi, which everyone in this universe is, would be nationalistic. And they love Hitler because they have a mural of him. They'd be doing the Nazi salute. They would have the American flag with the swastika outside their house. Peacemaker, who is like, an American hero, quote unquote, is how he likes to think of himself, would absolutely have the imagery on his chest. It's revealed this universe's Peacemaker was often quite like that. His brother was like that. There would be no reason this would be the first time we're confronting this decision, this ultimate dilemma, other than if you notice the background extras. And then on top of that, it's the fake edginess where like no one is saying any racial slurs or anything that's actually politically anti-correct, which is like, that's not a realistic thing in this alternate universe. Like, you may as well ground this alternate universe in what it would be like had it actually happened. I mean, I would think that a world where these people were truly Nazis and truly racist and homophobic or whatever would probably be saying some slurs. I mean, even in Peacemaker Season 1, Robert Patrick's character said some slurs in there when he was talking about other races. It's uncomfortable, yes, but it does allow the actual twist to have that much more of a punch. The reasoning that James Gunn even said that they didn't do this was to make the actress who plays Adebayo feel comfortable, which is super lame to say. I'm gonna be honest, like, whatever, the actress wants to feel comfortable, cool. She's also a professional pretender, and I think if she can't handle other professional pretenders reading a script that says the slur in it, maybe she should find a different line of work.
We're doing a read, and Leo says, and then he goes, "Hey man, hey guys, cut. I just can't do this. This is not me." Samuel Jackson, say that shit, motherfucker.
It would help really punch that point home of how disgusting this universe really is if they were doing that. I don't need to see it, I guess, but if you're going to have this scene where Adebayo's chased by all the racists, you may as well put it in there to help drive that point home. On top of that, James Gunn got so much credit in this episode, for not pulling any punches, whereas they don't even show us these, assumingly horrible camps where the minorities are doing slave labor for the Nazis. They mention them, but they don't ever show it. Once again, that slur is really pulling a punch that would help give this true impact as a reveal. There's a great way to do this as a subversive twist, where it's not explicitly said, but you could have it set up with Peacemaker's travels to this universe that, people are scared of this police state. The secret police are going to come and break down their door and arrest them if they say something bad about the government. You could have a conversation that implies that. This is something like a show like Man in the High Castle did, where it showed America as this suburban, like, picturesque place that the Nazis had won, but truly there was a lot of unrest and people did not feel safe with where they were. And the world truly underlying was an actual crapshoot because the policies that a Nazi regime would put in place would fail miserably and are immoral by all means. So this subversive twist is just, that's kind of like supposed to be a gotcha almost, if you didn't notice the extras in the background, is actually just a gotcha for James Gunn, who wrote this alternate universe as some idyllic, picture-perfect area. Everyone is happy, there's nothing bad happening except for the one Sons of Liberty attack that happens once a week. There's superhero threats, but there's no real threats. That is inherently messed up in a way to write that. Like, that's a stupid way to write this. You need to have that everyone is clearly uncomfortable and unsafe because the majority of the population would in fact not be in support of a Nazi regime. It's naturally un-American, which you can push in your story, and it would help this twist. You could do this twist, and it would allow viewers who are paying attention to actually pick up on that, instead of how it's done in this show. During that spiel, I mentioned that Adebayo was chased by the racist and the Nazis. Well, this is one of these moments in the show where I'm going to explain to you what happens exactly to show you the stupidity in the writing of this show, the luck, the contrivance, and just the overall decision-making that makes no sense for what a character would think or could logically happen. So Adebayo is walking down the street, and there's white people looking at her all concerned, because obviously she is the only minority they've seen ever, because the minorities are all in these work camps or whatever. So she's walking down the street, and then Keith, Peacemaker's brother, his car screeches to a halt driving past her. Keep that in mind, he's driving a car. He gets out of the car and yells, "Look out! I'm black!" Then a whole bunch of white people, all the racists, come out of their houses and they begin to try to chase Adebayo down, to hunt her down. At one point, another truck screeches to a halt as a whole bunch more Nazis get out of the truck to come grab her. At one point, while Adebayo's running, she makes a turn and comes up to a fence, a very tall fence, where she grabs, and it also one that'd be difficult to climb, but she grabs and jumps over the fence, ending up in someone's backyard, where she then, consciously and willingly, makes the decision to jump into the swimming pool to get away from the Nazis chasing her. Then, the people chasing her, also consciously of their own volition, make the decision to jump in the pool after her to save her. Right when Adebayo might get grabbed, Judo Master's hand reaches in and helps pull Adebayo out before Judo Master electrocutes every single person who was chasing her, killing them in the pool. Alright, in case you didn't pick up why any of what I just said is clear, let me explain it to you. I'll start with the elephant in the room. Adebayo is very fat. Alright, look, I'm not exactly the picture of perfect human health, okay? But Adebayo is definitely not the picture of perfect human health. She is very fat. I'm pretty sure I wouldn't be able to outrun this many racists surrounding me. And Adebayo is surrounded by a lot of skinny racists who are absolutely would be determined to catch her. Not to mention, one of the people here is a literal superhero in this universe. Yet somehow, on foot, she manages to escape every single one of them. Not to mention, at two separate points, a car, I think it's a truck, both times, pulls up in the street, and instead of them staying in the car to chase her, or whatever, they don't use the car at all. They all get out of the car and continue to chase her. Then, again, the fat Adebayo effortlessly climbs over this fence that I'm not even sure I could climb over, let alone climb over it that easily. And none of what I just said is even the stupidest, most contrived thing that happens in this sequence. The dumbest part is that she decides the fastest way and the best way to get away from these people is to jump in a pool and swim to the other side. Your average middle school track and field athlete runs a 100-meter dash faster than Michael Phelps swims a 100-meter dash. So you can put all the other stuff aside, adrenaline, whatever. This is so utterly stupid, especially when the people chasing her decide to jump in after her. If you're a kid running with your older sibling and you're playing tag and someone jumps in the pool, you go to the other side of the pool. You don't jump in the pool after them, because being on land, controversial, I'm gonna say this, is a lot faster than swimming. So the pure luck that she decides to get in this pool, let alone all the build-up for her to get here, and that the people jump in the pool after her. And then, on top of that, the contrivance that Judo Master happens to find this one spot and grab the telephone wire and electrocute everybody in the pool. All of this to set up a joke about Judo Master saying, well, that's the most people I've ever electrocuted in a pool before.
And if the words "and then" belong between those beats, you're
There are conveniences, contrivances, and stupidity like that in so many sequences in every episode of this whole show. This is one that maybe isn't even the dumbest, but you could probably argue is one of the dumbest. That's why I explained it, just to show that a very simple scene is riddled with these contrivances and conveniences, often in the nature of setting up a joke. The last plot point I'm gonna even talk about here is the finale. I've talked about this separately because it doesn't really connect with the rest of the show at all, like I mentioned earlier. In the plot point of it boils down to this idea that Rick Flag Sr. wants to create a prison for the metahumans in the multiverse. Now, there's a line earlier in the show where Lex Luthor mentions that metahumans are taking over the world, and, you know, Rick Flag has been fine with this in the past, and the government has been fine with this and whatever, even though the opening scene in Superman has text that literally tells us metahumans have been around for 300 years. The era of gods and monsters has been around for 3 centuries. So for whatever reason, now they're deciding this is a problem. They're taking over the world. This needs to be stopped. Remember, Rick Flag Sr. in Superman literally apologized to him when Lex Luthor had Argus arrest Superman. He did not believe that what they were doing was right. So why does he now want to imprison every single metahuman regardless of wrongdoing? So now he's willingly working for Lex Luthor, who he thought was kind of scummy in the Superman movie and should obviously know that now, but he's willingly working with him instead. And seemingly all of this is because Rick Flag wants revenge on Peacemaker, who is not even a metahuman. I'll point out, he is literally just a normal human who has technology. He's not actually a metahuman. And B, he would have so many other ways to take revenge on Peacemaker than put him in a metahuman prison. So I don't think this plot point makes any sense with what's been established so far in this universe.
Like, this happened and then this happened and this happened. That's not a movie, you know, that's not a story. Like Trey said, it's those two, but because, therefore, that gives you the causation between each beat, and that's a story.
These examples of inconsistent, stupid, moronic, contrived, convenient storylines, inconsistencies, are just some minor examples from this show, except arguably the last one, which is kind of the overall plot of that finale. Every episode has these and the driving factor behind whatever the main plot point you could say, I guess, is in each episode. Like I said, most of these writing issues are serving the purpose to set up a joke. This is not something unique to Peacemaker. Remember in Superman, where James Gunn ruined Jor-El and Superman's Kryptonian parents, all to set up a secret harem joke that was repeated constantly and wasn't super funny to me, but maybe you found it funny, whatever. The problem is, that happens in this show constantly, where there's a stupid plot point or something that doesn't need to be there, all to serve the purpose to set up a joke, instead of the other way around, where the joke somewhat sets up the plot, which still isn't strong storytelling, but is better than what happens in this show. Some of these examples are like the entire Nazi world just being set up for that Hitler mural joke, or, you know, this great plot point that Peacemaker's dad in this universe actually isn't even as evil as his one in his main universe, and he's trying to do what's right even though the world doesn't want him to. That's all just set up for Vigilante running in and stabbing him. That's just the joke. I already mentioned the telephone wire and the electrocution joke from the Autobio scene. Each of these jokes, depending on your sense of humor, might be a little funny when you first see them. Guess what? If you see this episode again, or this show again, or this season again, they're not going to be funny because they're one-time sort of catch you off guard punchline jokes. Those aren't something that have a funny nature to them historically. Maybe I'm stepping out of turn. Maybe you would enjoy and find that hilarious every time you see it. I tend to disagree and think that's not good for the health of this show long term. And then on top of all of that, like I mentioned earlier, the pacing is awful. That's so disappointing me, because one of the very few positives I took away from Creature Commandos was that the pacing was actually very well done in that show. The episodes were super efficient. Whereas in this show, there's one episode that literally just involves them setting up a door. Then the following episode is them preparing to go through said door. Those are 2 episodes in an 8-episode series. That is horrible pacing, horrible efficiency. Mixing with that, pretty much every episode has a multiple minute long montage set to music, basically a music video in every episode. Some song plays and there's slow motion montages happening. That all builds up to the finale, which has not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 slow motion music video montages that happen in one episode of the show. Not to mention, even if you want to keep the viewer engaged with all of this happening, you should probably put some action in your superhero character show. Season 1, pretty much every episode had a big Peacemaker fight scene in it. This season has 2 action scenes involving Peacemaker. The end of episode 1, where he kills his doppelganger, is an action scene, and then I believe it's episode 3, where he stops the Sons of Liberty attack, is the other action scene. Now, there are a couple minor action scenes, sort of, but pretty much every other major action scene happens off-screen in the show, which just adds to the just drudgy feeling of each episode. Luckily, the runtime isn't that long for most episodes. They're around the 30-minute mark-ish. But boy, do they drag on because of this pacing problem. Okay, let's move on from the story, because another massive problem with the writing in this show is the dialogue. In order to, I guess, try and be funny, basically every other sentence in this script has the word f in it. Now, being someone who has talked to another human being before in my life, I feel pretty qualified to say that's not usually how a conversation goes. There's a scene that's supposed to be super emotional between Peacemaker and Harcourt that's completely undercut because they just keep saying fuck every other sentence. And it's like all these dialogue scenes could have more impact if it sounded like it was a human writing them or someone who's spoken to another person before in their life. I have no problem with the occasional bad word being in a script, okay? But they need to be there where they make sense and not as some placeholder, like replacing with the F word. Just because we got this TVMA rating doesn't mean we need to go around slinging f around every other sentence. I mean, seriously, these conversations feel like it was a 7th grade boy who just discovered what swearing was. Coincidentally, James Gunn might have been with some 7th grade boys when he wrote this script.
Remember, they're just jokes. We're all gonna die soon, and there's no sequel.
And while I know that tweet was just a poor taste joke, it underlines the weird sense of humor James Gunn has. That weird, strange, twisted sense of humor is riddled throughout this entire show. I mean, one of the music videos that happens in the finale is set to a song titled "F***ing My Heart in the Ass." This sense of humor is fine with oversight and when used in moderation. Just like in the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie, where he was limited with a PG-13 rating and had oversight from creatives at Marvel. But as said by James Gunn, Peacemaker's a show where he has no oversight and gets to do whatever he wants. This leads to consistent nudity in basically every episode through the first half this season.
Tits rule. John Cena rules. It's kind of the 2 coolest things.
Random orgy scenes or a cameo by Lex Luthor talking about how he hears prison sex happening. Again, this weird twisted sense of humor wouldn't be a problem if it wasn't every other scene in every other sentence. Snyder's DCEU projects were superhero shows trying to be edgy, or superhero movies trying to be edgy, whereas so far the DCU is James Gunn's superhero projects trying too hard to be funny. Just because one of those is less stuck up or pretentious to you than the other doesn't mean either are any good. Like, I don't mean to come off sounding like the fun police here, okay? Obviously, it goes without saying that you're able to enjoy whatever you want, however you want. You interact with media in different ways. For example, I think the prequel Star Wars movies are a lot of times writing messes with crappy dialogue and very strange story elements, but I still love the movies for what they are. I have fun when I watch them. But that does not mean The Phantom Menace is a good movie by any means, nor does it mean it's incapable of bringing you joy. War of the Worlds is one of the worst movies I've ever seen, but I had more fun watching it than almost anything else this year. That being said, at the same time, myself or other people are allowed to find this show not fun. I'm allowed to look analytically and point out the dumb contrivances in the plot, and I can point out the nightmarish writing within it. The internet has consistently decided a negative opinion on a movie or show that they liked or was heartfelt and fun is a grift or disingenuous, whereas positivity always gets a pass. I have no problem if someone's overly positive about a show or a movie, but they need to be able to back up these problems and horrific writing in it than a defense other than I had fun, because that's not a true solution to the criticisms that you can level towards the story. That's all I'm going to say really about the internal elements and problems with the show. I'm sure that there are far more detailed versions of what I just did out there. But that's all I want to say about that, and I kind of look more at the meta-analysis level of this. The third project of the DCU is this show. It's a direct follow-up to the family-friendly Superman movie that was, without a doubt, marketed towards kids and family with the dog or just Superman in general. He's a family-friendly character. And the direct follow-up to that is a TVMA show absolutely riddled with language and nudity so that you couldn't even watch it with a kid who was getting into the DCU. And this is supposed to be important for the setup of the next Superman movie. By Gunn's own words, it's the prequel and setup to Man of Tomorrow, and setup for the rest of the DCU.
Superman leads into this show, and then we have the setting up of all of the rest of the DCU in this season of Peacemaker. It's incredibly important.
And then on top of that, it's objectively true that Marvel started collapsing once they started shoving the multiverse down the throat of fans. Now, we can argue till we're blue in the face why that is, whether it was adapted improperly or used ineffectively or whatever. But the truth is, normie fans are sick of the multiverse. They don't care anymore. They just want a story that makes sense. Instead of avoiding that, with the launch of the DCU, James Gunn decides to dive headfirst in and use the multiverse as a driving plot point in his show that's the direct follow-up to Superman. We already have multiple versions of multiple characters, let alone if you want to talk about the fact that Peacemaker as a whole uses elements from the DCEU in past movies, but not all of them. And you can't question that, otherwise you're called media illiterate or saying, James Gunn said this on Twitter. I shouldn't have to know what James Gunn says on Threads or Twitter to know what's happening with the timeline of this universe I'm trying to follow. I should be able to watch the movie, then watch the show, then watch the next movie, and not ever have to go to alternate media sources to figure out how all of it ties together. It should be pretty obvious. And look, if you want to level this criticism that Peacemaker isn't made for me, I guess that's fair, that's fine, that's whatever. But that's part of the problem. I'm a 19-year-old dude who loves superheroes. I love sci-fi, action, and fantasy. I should be the target audience. If you told simple stories, or even just coherent stories about characters people cared about and were classical hero journeys, your DCU would have been off to a better start. Let alone the fact that you then decide to alienate the people who don't like your incoherent crap pile by calling them racist or having a pointless, stupid political message line in there where Adebayo, who had just been chased by racist Nazis in this alternate world, says that this alternate world isn't too much different from our own universe as we like to think it is. Yeah, except for the fact that you were just chased by freaking Nazis, lady, and you literally own a business in the other world. Shut up. And I know it's not the actress's fault or the character's fault. It's the writer's fault. That's the problem here. Or then you want to alienate it even further by conflating Nazis with Christians and mentioning a dumb line about they love Jesus Christ here in Nazi world. Shut up, okay? That's stupid writing. This is a horrible strategy to try to get people to want to watch your universe. Whether you agree with the political messaging in this show at all is completely irrelevant because it's going to lead to your universe failing because you're alienating at least 50% of your potential audience half the time. Same goes with blaming the fans. Star Wars did this. Remember when Kenobi and Acolyte were terrible stories that didn't work at all? And instead of accepting that, they just walked out and said the fans were the ists and the phobe. They said, you're racist, you're homophobic, whatever. And guess what? No, we weren't. Your story just sucked. Is there a small minority of people who maybe didn't like the show because they're racist and homophobic? Sure. Maybe, but the point is the show sucked. That's why people didn't watch it. And that can apply to your universe as well, James. Fan blaming has been a consistent problem in Hollywood and something James Gunn himself knew and managed to avoid until now. Remember when there were idiots saying Superman is woke? Okay, I think those people are stupid. But still, there were some of the actors who decided to go out and attack those fans and say, well, this movie, whatever, blah, 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 it's not for you, you're not gonna like it. Whereas James Gunn was handled it cleverly. He said, I think this movie is about kindness. It's for everyone. Now, ultimately, the story was a suck, but who cares? The point is, he knew that, and he knew to avoid that until now, where he said you're racist if you didn't like whatever episode it was. And I will point out, Peacemaker did not once chart on the Nielsen streaming charts, which is a disaster for your show that's supposed to be the foundation of your new universe. It only took 3 projects, but I've already arrived where I'm at for Star Wars or Marvel. I am gonna go into these expecting disappointment and trash, and hopefully I'll be pleasantly surprised by what I see on the other side. That is my very brief analysis of Peacemaker Season 2. There are so many more problems with this show. And like I said, I could be here for hours breaking each and every one of those down. I'm sure there's probably a video out there that might do that. I'm, after all, just an idiot who sits here and yaps about stuff. There are countless other perspectives on this show, I'm sure, and you should go listen to those. Make your own opinion. Don't do what people on the internet tell you. Feel about something how you will. This is just why I feel this way about this show. If you stuck around this long, thanks for watching. Whether you agree with me or not, I appreciate it. And I'll see you next time. Consider subscribing. Have a good one.